If you're trying to use money that requires banks, you can't trust the banks. The US dollar will have lost 99.9% of its value over 100 years. Warren Buffett knows this. Charlie Munger knows this. Basically, your money in the bank isn't money. Okay, so the answer is you shouldn't have any money in a bank. You're basically losing 7% of all your wealth every year in a good year, if it's the dollar. You're absolutely losing all your money over the course of a decade.
Hey guys, welcome back to Let's Talk Crypto. In a time when 3 out of the 4 largest banks have gone out of business in the last 90 days, most people are taking time to assess the real risks of the banking system. In his latest interview with PBD Podcast, Michael Saylor shared his view on the current banking crisis to explain why one shouldn't keep their money in the bank. Saylor discusses the main differences between really bad fiat money and the not so bad, such as the US dollar, demonstrating how quickly it is losing its value. That means that if you are holding money, you will eventually lose it all. He also explains the main effects of the banking crisis on people's trust, and Saylor believes you can't trust the banks, especially if you live outside the US. In Saylor's opinion, there is only one bank you can trust, Bitcoin. This is because it is run by incorruptible software in cyberspace, outside of the reach of any government control. Regarding the ongoing banking crisis, the 4 big banks in the US will most likely weather the storm, but the same cannot be said of the small regional banks, according to Saylor. Will we see more banks collapse? Let's listen to Michael Saylor as he gives his perspective on the banking crisis and provides advice on how people should manage their money. But before we do, please consider subscribing to our channel, as we bring you daily content on the latest crypto news. And now, let's jump right into the video.
The bottom line is, if you're trying to use money that requires banks, you can't trust the banks, right? You certainly can't trust the banks in Africa and South America and most of Asia. It used to be Americans thought they could trust American banks. Now they're realizing that they can't trust American banks. So the first order impact of the banking crisis is people think, well, maybe the money I had in the bank's going away, and so I ought to put it in a bank in cyberspace that isn't controlled by the government or by the bankers, and that's Bitcoin. The second order impact is the solution to the banking crisis is print more dollars. And if you print more dollars, the actual monetary inflation rate goes 10%, 15%, 20%. So you think, why do you think those bonds crashed? Because they're actually claims on dollars. Do you really want to hold $1 billion of Zimbabwe dollars? What if I offered you 10 billion Zimbabwe dollars? I mean, the answer is it's going to a nickel, okay? So if the paper currency keeps crashing, then you can't own anything that's currency related. You can't own a currency derivative. You need to own something that politicians can't print more of. Okay, well, that's oil, that's land. But the problem is, try hauling 100,000 barrels of oil from where you are to London, where you want to be. How are you going to do that? So it's simple. If people lose faith in the banks, they lose faith in the currency. When they lose faith in the currency, they lose faith in the government. When you lose faith in the bank, the currency, and the government, and someone says, what can you trust? The answer is you can trust Bitcoin because you can custody your own asset, you can run your own node. And at the end of the day, even if the Chinese want to shut it down, they can't. If the Russians want to shut it down, they can't. If any nation state wants to shut it down, they can't. If the US wanted to shut it down, they can't. And so everybody wants something that they can trust that is beyond the reach of a corrupt politician, a corrupt corporate executive, or they don't have to be corrupt. They can just be well-meaning, trying to do the right thing in a misguided fashion. Money is a store of value, and there are multiple monies, and they're not created equal. So let me give you the world's worst money. The worst money in the world is like Argentine pesos or Venezuelan bolivars or Zimbabwe dollars or weak money. The official inflation rate in Argentina is 105%. But that's the official rate, which is that understates it. The actual inflation rate would be higher. And if the inflation rate is running 100%, that means your money is losing half of its value every 12 months. That means that within 10 years, you have nothing. Okay? So bad money, bad currency or bad money loses all of its value over the course of a few years. In Venezuela, you lose all your value in 36 months. In Argentina, in 10 to 20 years, the Argentine peso was 1 to the dollar 21 years ago. If you had $1 million 21 years ago, the Argentine peso right now is about 480 to the dollar. So that's not a 99% loss. That's a 99.8% loss, right?
In how many years?
21 years. Okay. So what I'm saying is you don't have money if you have weak currency. Now let's take strong currency. Well, the strongest currency in the world is the dollar. That's not money. You're losing 99% of your wealth over the course of 90 years in the U.S. dollar, maybe more. The only difference between the U.S. dollar and the peso is whereas it takes 20 years to lose your family's fortune in the peso, it takes about 90 years to lose your family's fortune in the dollar. The U.S. dollar will have lost 99.9% of its value over 100 years. Warren Buffett knows this. Charlie Munger knows this. Basically, the bottom line there is your money in the bank isn't money. Okay, so the answer is you shouldn't have any money in a bank, right? You're basically losing 7% of all your wealth every year in a good year. If it's the dollar, you're losing 15% of your wealth in a not good year. If it's the dollar, you're absolutely losing all your money over the course of a decade. So that's kind of weak money. Okay money was gold, but not great. The strongest money in the world is Bitcoin, because Bitcoin is absolutely capped at 21 million. It is global money. You could take $1 billion of Bitcoin across a border. You can transfer it to a counterparty, and no government can interdict that, and nobody can inflate that.
How was the customer service with Bitcoin when you called the 1-800 number?
There's nobody working at the bank of Bitcoin to steal your money. Bitcoin is a bank in cyberspace run by incorruptible software. It's going to keep your money. If you are incompetent, then you're going to suffer the consequences.
The Federal Reserve has already hinted that they won't lower rates until December. Under these conditions, smaller banks probably won't be able to last much longer. So, what should people do to protect themselves? Will we see larger banks fail as well? Let's hear what Saylor has to say.
What I think happens to the banking system is all of the regional banks, the small, mid-sized banks are at a massive disadvantage right now because the government is showing that they're not going to bail out those equity holders. So there's a migration of deposits from the small banks to the big banks. I think the JP Morgans, the Bank of Americas, the mega banks will continue. They'll be just fine. They'll be supported by the government. The small banks are going to struggle, and that's what you see going on right now. If you're a depositor, you'll probably get bailed out by the government. If you're a bondholder in the bank or an equity holder of the bank, you won't get bailed out, right? And so there's a crisis for investors, whereas everybody that's a depositor doesn't want to sit around and take the risk, right? Who wants any anxiety? So I think that to the extent that you rely on banks, clearly the world is waking up, and the U.S. is waking up, and they're thinking, I want to be with big banks. With regard to what individuals should do, I think the logical answer is if you have expenses in the next 3 months, you have your expenses in the local currency because it's legally obligated for you to pay in the local currency. For the next 3 years of expenses, or 1 to 3 years of expenses, you put your wealth in the strongest world currency in the world. That's the dollar right now, but you make sure that you have that currency either self-custodied or you have it in a bank that you trust. That's hard. If you were in Lebanon right now, you wouldn't put your money in any bank. You would actually put it on the Bitcoin blockchain. For any amount of money you want to keep the rest of your life, if you want to give it to your kids, if you want to actually retire on it, anything that's investable asset, you would put it in Bitcoin. You would put it in the strongest possible world currency, the global money, and that's Bitcoin. You're not going to get rich investing in dollars. You'll lose all your money if your dollars are in a weak bank, and if your dollars in a strong bank, you'll just get poor slowly. You're going to get poor rapidly if your money is in not the dollar, but a weaker currency, and you're going to get completely bankrupt if you trust a weak bank. And so MicroStrategy, by the way, we had like $90 million. We had $4+ billion worth of Bitcoin. So go figure, right? 98% of our assets are actually in the strong money. 2% is in the world's strongest currency in a good bank in one of the big four banks, right? And that's about as much exposure as I want to a currency.
Saylor believes that one should not keep money in the bank, as it is losing value and banks cannot be trusted. He suggests that Bitcoin is the only bank that can be trusted, and that if one is looking to safeguard their wealth, this is where they should put most of their money. What do you think of Saylor's view of the banking system and the current financial crisis? Let us know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please make sure to give us a like and subscribe. Thank you so much for watching. This is Let's Talk Crypto, and we'll see you in the next video.